I'm going to take you through some of the differences between Azure API Management and the Zuplo API Management product. Let's talk about consumption versus features. In Azure, you have a choice to make when picking your API Management product. Do you want to use their consumption tier, which offers some benefits like serverless compute and auto scale, but gives up on a lot of API management features that you're probably going to want? Or do you want to go with one of the other tiers like Premium, which will have all of the features you want, but then isn't serverless, doesn't auto scale, is extremely expensive? Or maybe you'd prefer something that's a single product that scales serverlessly, that has all of the features you need for API management and much more, but doesn't provide you with this difficult decision to make at the beginning. And actually, another place where difficult decisions kind of hit you in the face straight away with Azure API Management is which data center do you want to be? Do you want to be near all of your customers or particularly pick one and be in the US or somewhere else? Well, with Zuplo, that isn't a challenge because we're always globally deployed at the edge in over 250 data centers around the world. That gives you insane caching performance no matter where you are, and also is serverless and scales automatically without any concern or worrying about infrastructure or scripting. It's incredibly easy. And actually, to make that point, I think let's just go and take a look at Azure API. And let's actually create an instance of it right now. So I will just switch to here. I'm going to create a new instance of Azure API Management. I'm going to have a lot of questions to answer, like which region do I want to be in? Why can't I just be in all of them right next to where my customers are, which are everywhere? We'll put US Central. We're going to give it a resource name. We'll call this versus Zuplo demo. Organization name, blah mulmorg.com. And then we get into some of these difficult decisions now. Do I want the consumption tier or do I want one of the other tiers that gives me lots of features? Well, let's go for the big one. Let's go for a premium tier. I'm going to create an instance of this now. A lot of other questions I could be answering here, but we're just going to kick that off and get it creating. And that should hopefully be ready in just a few minutes. Whilst that's going, actually, let's talk about some of the other things. So we just saw what doing a deployment looks like. If you want to automate your deployments, that's going to be pretty involved, manual scripting of deployments. All of the configuration for Azure API Management is actually held in obscure databases that you can't access and have to access through API calls and the like. Whereas with Zuplo, it is designed for GitOps enablement. That means everything that defines the gateway is a text file that can be stored in Git and version controlled and managed and reviewed and all of the usual stuff, that you expect as a developer in 2022. But best of all, it's GitOps enabled. So that means it's very easy to connect to a GitHub repo, say, or Bitbucket or GitLab, whatever you use. And then when you do a push, when you commit and pull in a merge pull request, basically that commit to a branch will trigger a deployment automatically that will happen in under 20 seconds. And that's one of the key things about Zuplo versus Azure API Management that customers really love, is this GitOps enablement and the ability to have many, many deployments. So with Azure API Management, we've just kicked off a deployment now. Hopefully that'll be ready quickly. But it tends to be quite slow. They tend to be quite expensive, one for every region, one for every deployment that you need. Whereas with Zuplo, we've designed it from the ground up to enable collaboration so that you can very easily have an environment for a team that's working on a project to share with another team or an individual. In fact, you can have unlimited environments. And the coolest thing about them is with every commit, they deploy worldwide over 250 data centers, typically in under 20 seconds. Why don't we take a quick look at that, actually? I think it's great to see an example. So let's create a new Zuplo project. So I'm going to call this Zuplo verse API M. And you'll notice this will be created very quickly. Actually, I'm able to start editing my configuration almost immediately. And the gateway itself, the developer instance of my gateway will be live. It's live already. That was like less than 10 seconds. So if you hit this now, it's a public URL that you can share with other people and collaborate with them. It's telling me I have no routes because I've not set up any routes yet, but we'll fix that in a second. And that's how quickly it is to get Zuplo live. So let's add our first route. I'm going to do a get. Let's add some parameters on cats, cat ID, dogs, dog ID, and we're going to use an echo endpoint. So this is going to rewrite to a backend we created called echo.zuplo.io. All that does is echo the request back to you. So it's very useful for debugging. So what we'll see is what was the request that was sent by the gateway to this endpoint. So we'll be able to see that. So I'm going to save that, and when this finishes spinning here, that means it's live. So let's go and take a look, and yep, there's our live endpoint now, and it's echoing everything that was sent to the gateway from the browser that the gateway then sent on to another service. And just to show you that that's what's happening, let's add a header here. So I'm going to add a header. I'm going to call the header foobar, and the value is going to be Wibble. I'm going to save that. When that save is finished, that change is live. So if I now refresh this, we should see that we have a foobar header making its way from the gateway to the back end. One of the other important things about Zuplo versus API management is that Zuplo is designed for real programmability. We call it the programmable API gateway. What you're going to see if you're using Azure API management is this need to do this very complex XML-centric C# scripting, which is difficult to say the least. Here's an example actually of one of these scripts. You'll see it has this kind of JSON C# components. It's hard to read, embedded in XML. And all this is really doing actually is moving parameters from the parameterization of the URL into the headers. So, that's a very complex thing to look at and think about when that's what I want to do. So what if we wanted to use the real power of programming in Zuplo? Let me show you just how easy that is. So let's switch back to the browser and go to Zuplo here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom policy. So we're going to create a new custom policy. I'm going to call it move dog ID. And we're going to code up a little policy that what it's going to do is going to grab the dog ID from the request. So grounds dog ID equals request.params.dog ID. Then it's going to create a new headers object because we want to pass the original headers. So we're going to have something that catches all the original headers. So we're using web standards here. This headers is part of MDN, it's part of the web standards. We'll take the original headers as a starting point. And then we're going to add a new header, which I'll just use set, called dog ID. And that's going to take that value we read from the params object. And then we're going to create a new request, const nr equals new. We're going to use a Zuplo request here. We'll pass in the old request, and we'll also set the headers based on that new headers object that I created. And then I'm going to return this. And now I have a policy that will actually copy that across. So let's take a look. Let's add custom code policy. I don't need these options. Let's delete that. And the policy was called move dog ID. So I'm going to save that. Again, that should be live right away. So if I hit this URL, we should now see that we have a dog ID that equals :dog ID. That's because that's the value I have here. But if we change this to be Beagle, notice it now says Beagle. So very, very easy to program this, and you have tremendous power. Like pretty much everything we do in Zuplo is done the same way that you have access to here. I'll take this one step further. What if you wanted this policy, rather than to be specific to dog ID, what if you wanted it just to move all headers, all of the parameters into headers? Well, that would be pretty easy as well. So all we do now is say, instead of that, we'd say object.keys request.params .for each, where k is the key, and then we'll say headers.set k request.params. So pretty simple JavaScript if you're familiar to this stuff. And that's going to move all of the parameters automatically to the request. So very reusable. I could use this across multiple environments, multiple Zuplos. And let's go and see it in action. I've saved my change. So now I have a dog ID, but guess what? I also have a cat ID. So if I set the cat ID to, I don't know, a breed of a cat, to a 34, and the dog ID to a 64, then you'll see those values are being passed as headers. So insanely easy. Now, I mentioned GitOps. Let's show just how easy that is in Zuplo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this repo to Git. And we're going to call it, I think Zuplo versus APIM is a good name. So let's create a repository in my Josh Twist repo. That's now connected. And if we go and take a look at that repo, you'll see, because we already have a commit, we already have a deployment taking place. So this is actually deploying, started 6 seconds ago, 7 seconds ago, and boom, I now have another environment that is live, that is the Zuplo.app. And actually we can see this in action. So this is at 250 data centers around the world. So cats, 23, dogs, 43. And you'll see we're getting the cat ID, the dog ID, and that's from a live environment. I want to show you that in the extreme though, actually, if we go and take a look at this again. So that's one environment. I've created a production environment for my main branch. Let's create a new branch called preview. And already that deployment has started, and I have a preview deployment, will be ready in less than 20 seconds and deployed around the world. So very, very easy for developers to collaborate, create environments effortlessly for testing. We have integrated testing capabilities as well. So here's my preview environment. I've got nothing on the root path, so you get a 404 there. That's expected. But one thing I do want to show you, you can see our environments here, like preview. With all of these environments, we also get a developer portal. So we generate a developer portal for you with this, sort of Stripe quality experience. You have authentication can be set up in here. API keys are available in here, etc. Self-service for your developers. Looks great. It's highly customizable. It's extremely high performance. Doesn't load in fragments as you'll see with some of the other solutions. This feels like something an engineer would be proud of. And so, yeah, that's one of the other benefits is we don't have this slow, complex portal. We offer this Stripe quality experience. And then the last thing, though there's still many other differences I'm going to close on, is the fact that we offer integrated web application firewall. So the Zuplo product, just included in the standard pricing, includes our web application firewall. So not only we do help you with best practices around API security with all of our JOT policies and JOT tokens, but we have integrated WAF that's included in the price you see on the site. So that's some of the reasons why you might choose or try Zuplo if you're thinking about using Azure API Management. Oh, there's one other as well. I actually founded the Azure API Management team at Microsoft and designed Zuplo to deliberately counteract some of the challenges I saw customers struggling with that product. So give us a shot.